There we are now recording. So just before I start having a discussion with yourself, Nathaniel, I wanted just to share a little bit of sad news. For some of you who have been around with indie authors for a while, you probably knew Eddie Doody, who was one of our stalwarts, a great character and a prolific writer. He wrote under the name of Tony Franks, and he sadly passed away just over 2 weeks ago now, after such a short illness. So I just wanted to just kind of mention today, because just he was a real character, and for anybody who was part of our sort of authors community in our book camp group would know. Would certainly know of Eddie. So we're just sending our thoughts and love and wishes to Anne, his wife, and his family, and he's going to be sadly missed. So I think that just wanted to kind of commemorate and speak of him today. So now let's move on to some happier notes. So Nathaniel, welcome to Indie Authors Cafe.
Thank you very much.
I love the fact that you have something connected to your book behind you today as well.
Yes. This is my specially commissioned map of the world that's created from my novel Liberty Bound. So I've got an artist called Juliet Percival from Durham to do it for me. She's done a wonderful job.
Yeah, it's just a little extra, isn't it? That just kind of brings the book to life. That's what we like. So before we kind of started and delve into to the stuff around the book, can you tell us just a little bit about you?
Yes, so I'm a civil servant by profession. I work in London, central government, largely working in the health around nursing. So I've been there for over sort of 25 years now, it's coming up to. And in terms of my writing, I started writing short stories when I was in my teens, so a number of years ago. But I never really took it very seriously, other than sort of throwing down ideas. I never went to any classes or tried publishing. They were very much ideas without structure as such. And then as you grow older, wiser, and you learn a few tricks, I suddenly had the confidence and the will to actually do it seriously. So probably about 3 years ago, I actually put pen to paper and managed to spew out a novel in about 6 months in terms of the first draft. Surprising myself, which I think is an important thing when you're a new author, is that ability to go beyond what you think you can do. And I never thought, I thought I had a novel in me, but I didn't think I had the ability to get it out. So that was a pleasant surprise. And then when you share it with people, your confidence slowly builds as the reactions meet what you hope you've written down. And the more you invest in it in terms of sharing and getting advice from the professionals out there, then the more confident that you get. And then you bump into someone like Kim via the internet, and she does the magic to actually turn your dream into reality, and sort of change my sort of writing life, really.
Yeah, I'm going to come and join you. I'm going to pin myself to the side, because then I can see you I can see myself and see you. Well, they are perfect combination. And I can actually see Joseph Mead's joined us up just in the corner. He's sitting there with his cup, right? In the corner there. So, and what I would say, if anybody has got a question, we have got the chat facility on Zoom. So if you've got a question at all as we're having a little chat, please put your question in there. We'll get round hopefully to kind of ask it as well. So, well, thanks for that little potted history of your writing and where you've come from. And yeah, and it's been it's lovely. One of the things I love to do is just that I get to meet some great people as we are kind of sharing and putting the books together. And it's lovely to come back later on now that your book's been out for a little while, and have a chat about, the kind of just what it's been like, and also delve back thinking about the kind of development of the book. Because I know when I speak to some people, it's almost like, well, the book's done and it's kind of next, and they're on to the next thing, and maybe not stopping and kind of reflecting back on what was good and what worked and what helped. So that's partly what I'd like to have a chat about today. So I've got a few questions kind of just to kind of get us started. And I thought I would maybe I'll read the blurb for people just to kind of give them a wee insight into the book. So it's the end of civilization, and the remnants of society are hanging onto the edge of survival, having retreated behind walls, while prisoners roam in the wide open space beyond. But is anybody free? Finbarl is a guard defending the walls of Athenia, fighting to keep the flame of civilization burning. It is the only world he knows, and one he's willing to die for. But when he intervenes to protect a boy and his mother from a fellow guard, little does he realise his world is about to unravel, setting him upon a dangerous journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and discovery. Wow, you definitely want to read more about that, wouldn't you? That's it. So how did the story evolve? So are you a plotter or a pantser then, as we say, in terms of, did you have the whole thing laid out, or did you just write by the seat of your pants and it evolved?
A bit of both, to be honest. My previous technique was probably by the seat of pants, but this time, while the idea did flood my brain in ways that I cannot explain, the more excited I got as plot issues were solved in my mind, the more I realized I've got to get this down as a structure. So it was very much, you start with the idea, which is usually from observations within society, etc. You seek an analogy. How can I represent this through fiction in a narrative? What characters can sell this story? And you kind of ping pong that around your mind, formulating scenes, and then you start plotting the story arc, which is the broad story. And the best way is usually to have either the ending or the ending and the key moments within within the plot. So the twists, the turns, the dramatic exposés, the surprises. Yep. And with those markers, once I had plotted those on paper, you can then start filling in the gaps. And the gaps within were quite broad, and there was a lot of breathing space and a lot of flexibility. So I kept to the rough structure. I never veered from those marker points, with perhaps one exception where it just wasn't quite the right route to take. But beyond that, you then create what is rather an organic process. The story creates a life of its own. The characters come to life, their personalities take over. And so you put them into scenes, and then the scenes dictate how the character will behave. You learn a bit more about them, and then by learning a bit more about them, it maybe answers a question as to where they go next by their reaction. So if they're thrown a sudden curveball in a scene and they respond in an angry way, then they've obviously got to unpick whatever mess they create, and that can dictate how the next chapter is going to be. But you never veer from the main road, basically. Yeah. And that's how I got there. So yeah, knowing the ending was quite critical, because that gives you a clear horizon point to aim at. And then, like any good surveyor, you have those clear points of which the easiest way to get there. Yeah.
You know your kind of route. I suppose it's like if you've got a road map and you've got a destination, you know that there's a couple of stop off points that you're maybe going to hit.
Exactly, yeah, and you discover, oh, there's a nice National Trust site or something, I'll go and visit that, and that will change the story entirely. But you're still going to your end destination.
Yeah, because it's always fascinating to talk to writers about their creation process, because people are so different. And as you said, your characters then start to, so do they start to talk to you? I mean, do they become real enough for you to
Yes.
kind of connect with them as you were developing?
Yeah, I think you become part of them and they become part of you. I mean, when you start, you it's a bit like painting. You draw the outline of your character, so you know who your heroes are and you know who the baddies are, or that broad brushstroke, and you give them a few character traits, you know, a few descriptive elements, and a few personality traits. But generally, it's when you enter them into the environment that the details start to form, which is basically the painting, or the colouring in of your sketch. So it's quite an interesting process, and you do become absorbed in the story yourself and your characters. And in many ways, I would say when my first draft finished, the characters were not fully formed. So because the narrative is probably the most important thing, how your character gets from A to B via lots of other places. But by the end, you then, or I did, you revisit and you look at the scenes and how best your character can develop within those scenes. And that's something that can be sort of post first draft.
Yeah.
So for example, I had a rough sense that my character was going to start off as a naive zealot within the society that he's born and understands. But as his world falls apart, obviously he starts to question what he's known for all his life, and his character starts to change as a consequence. And so by the end, you have this heroic rebel who's willing to take on the world and is far more sympathetic character.
Yeah.
So that was his broad journey as a character.
Yeah.
But I had to revisit in terms of fleshing him out, to give him personality, to make him more sympathetic, to actually understand why he's making those decisions.
Yeah.
And one of the key elements for that is creating flaws. So I think at the start he was a bit of a sort of all-American hero type character, and that's quite bland, as most Hollywood blockbusters will prove. So I had to sort of revisit and think about his weaknesses. Why, he's living in a terrible world. He's had a terrible life. He's lost his parents when he was young. The future is not full of hope, etc., etc. And then I interjected elements such as, there was a dream element that I incorporated early on, which allows him to tell the story, the trauma that he suffered from losing his parents. So that seed is planted within the story then. There's obviously some other relationships that develop throughout. There's the romantic relationship that he has with the other main character, Aminatra. And through exposing his emotions in that way, you break the crust of the shell of his character, really, and you start to see within. And there's quite a pertinent scene quite close to the end where both Aminatra and Finbarl sort of break down in relation to sort of going cold turkey over a drug that they're sort of stuck on. But in breaking down, they're able to expose and articulate their particular weaknesses. So for Finbarl, for example, he's, for his whole life, he's been this figure of authority, beyond reproach, beyond criticism, and he can't allow other people to help him. He's never had any help in his life, therefore he's cut himself off basically from other people. But with that exposed, and with the relationship with Aminatra, he's able to work his way out of that and actually become a more balanced and sympathetic character by the end.
Yeah. And I definitely enjoyed seeing, you can definitely see the character and his because I didn't particularly like him, like I said at the start.
No.
Don't know about this, and then, but as you know, as I said, you definitely see his character develop. So by the time you get to then, you're really rooting for him.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a brutal world, and therefore,
yeah,
he was part of that world and had to be brutal. And I was very mindful that I'm creating a sort of anti-hero almost here by him not being particularly pleasant to anyone at the start. But that said, his character still has qualities that interest people at the start, so that you're willing to follow his story.
yeah.
I recently read The Great Gatsby, and I was surprised how unsympathetic the characters were throughout, and it felt a weakness. I know it's sort of seen as a classic, so far be it from me to poo-poo it, but no, the characters, there are no sympathetic characters in it, and I found that interesting. But I think with Finbarl, one of the key elements to help him develop as a character are the sub characters.
Yeah.
So you obviously have the relationship with the other main character, Jatinder, but the sub characters who you don't always have in your mind when you're plotting your story, they're very much tools that you use as you go down little side roads and create other story plots. But your villains, your comedic elements, those characters that you can't quite, as a reader, decide whether they're good or bad, they're very important. One, because that they can be with your main character and goodies, and then you can suddenly flip the head and you discover that they're baddies, and with that relationship and dynamic, you can create surprises. So those vague, indescribable or characters that you can't quite pin down are really essential for driving stories. When you think of every classic story, it's tragedy, drama, comedy elements, and you need to have that spectrum of characters as a platform for your main character to bounce off and go off in different directions, but at the same time bring them all together so that your threads of your story come back into a single one at the end.
I think that's often a challenge certainly for writers as they start, really kind of getting into, from keeping their characters going and not lose. Sometimes I read some stuff that comes across to us with new writers who are very story driven, but the characters just kind of then are a bit two-dimensional, like you said. You're not getting the depth, or it's also a character, and they kind of lose a bit of story and plot, and it just slows everything down. And it's so as you were writing, and you've said that obviously you went back and revisited your initial draft. I mean, how did you get that perspective then? Did you have others who helped you with the development stage?
Yeah, I think had it been left entirely to me, the finished product would not have been a quality product good enough to publish. So I did actually seek professional support, and I had it professionally assessed by a company called Daniel Goldsmith Associates from London. And they provide a sort of 6 to 8 page written assessment, which looks at key elements from narrative, characters, marketability, lots of different elements, and they draw out where you need to develop it more. So, for example, my original manuscript, the dramatic moments didn't quite have the punch because I climaxed them before the suspense had been built.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's a fight scene right at the end, and it's a sort of climatic scene where two baddies, or the baddie and the goodie clash. Classic good versus evil, and it was over in a flash, and you just can't have that in drama. And so you don't want to stereotype it either. So you don't want to have a story that people have read before. So I realized there was another baddie in the story whose story hadn't quite finished. So you have a fight, and it ends in a sort of Pyrrhic victory for the hero, and then this other baddie is obviously on the scene, and he has a fight, and so you have a twist, a turn, suspense drawn out, etc., and you deliver the punchline. It's a bit like a well-told joke. You need that build up where people are listening, following, without really knowing what's coming next. And then obviously the punchline is the key thing, but it's nothing without that build up. So
yeah,
absolutely vital.
So in terms of your your characters that you created, have they got elements of people that you know? I mean, have you kind of been, are you an observational character generally who would kind of go, yeah, that's stuff, I know that there's interesting traits, and have you pulled those into the
I would say probably yes, but I would not say I've molded any character on a specific other person. I think there are elements of me probably in there through how would he think? Well, the only way I can think he can think is thinking like me. So but you do need to draw on, if you're doing a range of characters, you need diversity in them, and the only way you can really draw upon that is by drawing upon your experiences in life. The slightly odd people, the people who are in authority, all those key elements. If you haven't got them yourself through your own life experience, then you need to reflect on other people. So I think that's true in all walks of writing.
Yeah. I mean, you also chose to set, this your story, because you could have. It's one of those things where the storyline could have been in kind of almost a kind of modern day take with a just slightly different setting, but you chose to create your own kind of future world. And how much that then created, you've got bits of language that are different and a whole kind of setup. How much time did you spend really kind of trying to create what the vision of the world was going to be like?
Well, in many ways, I saw it as a bit of a shortcut and cheat, in the sense that I think I would have found it harder to have written a story in the modern world, because you have to create an environment that is authentic and recognizable. And so it would have probably required a bit more research and a bit more challenge from readers, sort of saying, well, actually, that's not how things work. You've got this wrong if you're talking about this is how policemen work or whatever. I just don't have that experience. By creating my own world, I had a free range to write how I wanted it. Obviously, again, in the same way that you draw on people to create your characters, I drew on certain elements that I was familiar with. So I wanted a world that is a bit of a stage with parameters. So you can see from the map behind me, there's the desert to the one side, high mountains to the other, and the community, if I move my head, the community is stuck in between in a sort of fertile oasis in the middle. And so it was a nice limiting world which I didn't have to stray out of. So within that world, you just create whatever elements your heart desires. So I had a nice town at the center of it, one single town. The wild ferals, they live in the mountains, and the prisoners live in the open space in between. So the factors were very limited, and that actually simplifies things considerably. The sequel that I'm planning, I was saying to a friend yesterday that whereas this might be a one set stage play, the next one will be a multi-set stage play, which will add extra dynamics and factors that will complicate things. So it will need a bit more thought and planning, that one.
So that's it. That'll get the brain challenged then.
Oh yeah.
For going forward. I suppose before, remind people, if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat. If you've got anything else you'd like to know. So since the book's come out, I mean, and one of the poll question we're going to talk around after is to kind of go into a bit more, give people an option around sort of marketing and sales side. But I just wanted to kind of ask, what's been most surprising for you, I suppose, in terms of since the book's come out, you know, generally? Has there been a really good surprise from having the book out? Well, let's start with that first of all. What has been the most positive aspect for you since you got it?
Well, I mean, my book looks like a book that should be on a bookshelf. You know, that was my most pleasing aspect of having my book published. It's very easy when you're, you know, I'm an amateur writer, and it's very easy to look amateurish. But my book, both in content, appearance, in any way, looks professional, reads professional, and is a professional product. So it sits on my bookshelf in pride, and you could not tell that it's any different from any of the other books. And
here we are, folks. There's
there you go.
Here we go. It was just suddenly dawning me there when we were talking about the changes that happened in the cover.
Yes.
As we were kind of like going through the kind of process of you know, designing the book, that made a little bit of a change.
Yes, yeah, no, it's everything about the book needs to be right. When you enter competitions, most competitions actually have a category for scoring, which includes the book cover. So the old saying about never judging a book by its cover could not be more wrong in terms of both sales and competitions. So it's important to get the elements right. Yeah, and other aspects that I was very much shocked by the amount of effort that needs to go into marketing. That's no one should go into book publication with the expectation that you're going to sell books easily. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of other people out there doing exactly the same. The market is no longer reading the Times literary supplement and choosing a book. You have to ensure your book's on a level slightly above everyone else's, and that's not easy to do. Getting reviews is very hard. You know, my book's been very lucky in getting very good reviews, but not getting large quantities of reviews, and that's been the frustration, I think, is the number of people who, there's plenty of services out there offering review.
Yeah,
you know, you provide your book for free, and you'll get we've sent it to our elite group of readers, and then they provide the reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and the percentage that you get back of actually who bother to review it is minimal, and that seems to be across all formats that I've tried to boost.
Challenge. That's a challenging aim. So where are you going next then? What's on the cards for you? Kind of going. You've said that you've got the idea for the second one for this.
Yes. So the sequel is sort of started. It's halfway there. But I'm a motivational writer, so I write when the ideas bubbling away in the head and need to be released before my head explodes. So the motivation to write the sequel has kind of subsided a bit, and I'm not feeling pressured in any way, but I've written a novella in the meantime, which was a long-term idea that once again started to ferment in my mind, and slowly I had everything, was able to put it into a good structure, and then wrote it down very quickly. And now, most recently, I've moved genres yet again, and I've started writing some children's rhymes regarding a caveman genius, to explain all the early discoveries and inventions by mankind. So this character called Moog accidentally discovers everything or invents everything that was essential for mankind's advancement in the early days. So I'm hoping to get that sort of illustrated and then maybe out as a children's book. So they can start, I'll capture the audience young, and then in later years they
then move them on, yeah. So,
right.
So they'll come up to Liberty Bound in future.
That's right, yeah.
Later. That sounds like a good tactic.
Long-term strategy, I think that's what that's called.
So how did you find the whole sort of lockdown, situation? So, just did it help you creatively, or did it hinder you, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised how many ideas I've had during the lockdown, but it's not been particularly conducive to actually motivating me to write. So I've been stuck at home. As I said, I normally work in London. Being stuck at home all day, I work in front of my computer, and then I don't necessarily have the inclination to sit in front of my computer at the weekend and write for that reason.
Yeah.
But that said, when the ideas have surfaced, and it's been quite a rich period for that, I tend to have this urge to get them out on paper. So, I've written a couple of short stories as well. So yeah, it's been quite a productive period, and yet not particularly helpful in terms of writing. So it's a weird one, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think, talking to some people, again, I suppose it depends maybe on how you write, where you write, where you get your inspiration from, because I'll take Sinclair as an example. I mean, Sinclair would go and sit in a cafe to write. But if there's been no cafes open, it's almost like that whole kind of like getting into that's a pattern of stuff.
Yeah. And the people and characters that we were talking about earlier, you obviously get inspired by them, and if you're not seeing anyone,
so maybe some books coming forward, then we're going to have all these kind of like some stories where somebody is going to be completely bored because they've been living in a box.
Isolation stories.
Or we've got the absolute opposite, where people have been so much in their imaginations that the books are wild, So
imaginary characters from childhood come back to life.
So that it's been fascinating just talking to you about your story journey and your development, and we really wish you lots of success, because it is a great book, and that's what I think more than anything, it's like you said, it's the challenge of people kind of getting to read read your stories and get out there. But the more that you write, even if it is a short story, if it's something you've put out and somebody hooks in and they like your style, then hopefully then they go, oh well, okay, even if you've written something, it's another genre. So
I certainly found writing my novella, all the lessons I'd learned from writing the novel, both how writing it badly in the first place, but then improving it, all those lessons, it made it far easier in writing. So that was an interesting experience.
So Joe's just put a question. I'm just interested to know if anyone here actually still uses paper and pen to write. So do you write on computer, or do you ever use stuff?
Yeah, very, very much computer.
Yeah. So Claire does paper and pen. She's putting in the chat. Yeah, I'm still a pen and paper person. I've actually got better at sort of kind of not having everything I ever do now still in the notepad. So I've got things that are on screen. Sinclair bought me an iPad with a pen purely for that, so that because I kept losing notes for stuff. So it was like, right, okay. And I've got into that. It's but I suppose it's the same way if you record things, they've got to learn your voice. The same thing with these apps, they've got to learn your handwriting to know that those are the words that you're actually trying to write, and can actually shift it then into text. So anybody, if there's any more questions, anybody got a question that they would like to ask? Claire, yes. Do you want to just put it in the chat, or do you want me to actually unmute? Would you rather?
Phone.
Right. Yeah,
we'll just like to ask, I can't even remember his name, the speaker.
Nathaniel M Wrey is his name. Yes. So.
I would like to ask Nathaniel, you weren't influenced by the novel or TV series or film Logan's Run at all, because that's a kind of futuristic where you've got these security guards called Sandmen, and civilization, everything's broken up into different cities, and theirs is the city of domes. And I never came across much in the TV series, but at first Logan would have been quite a hard man, and then he questions the civilization, and he runs away because everybody has to die at 30, because at the closing food and everything's free, and there's a limit to how much they can support without any financial economic system. So were you influenced by Logan's Run at all?
Well, I certainly remember watching the film when I was younger.
Yeah,
Michael York, I believe, in
yeah,
the slightly dodgy 1970 costumes or 1980s costumes. So yeah, I mean, I was not consciously influenced by it, but I can't say that I wasn't subconsciously influenced by it. I think, you know, the biggest influences are probably 1984 and some of those dystopian novels, but sometimes it's hard to tell where the inspiration comes from. Over a lifetime, it somehow all comes together, and your brain is a marvelous creature on its own, isn't it? And you don't know what's influenced you and what's actually prompted you to come up with an idea.
Yeah, and then when you start to get involved and share something, then it kind of grows, and yeah, it goes arms and legs. Okay, well, I think we haven't got any more questions just now for that. But so what I'm going to say is, thank you so much for sharing your writer's journey with us, and we definitely wish you lots of luck with that. I'm going to pause the recording now. So.